Welcome back to the Criminal Connection podcast, to chapter 2 of the King of Clubs. Now, if you missed chapter 1, which was last week, make sure you watch it, because otherwise you're going to spoil it. And you're not going to know what happened in McDonald's. All the naughty shit I got up to. Forget Jack and Ori. This is King of Clubs and Ori. Sex, drugs and thugs with Terry Turbo Stone. Only exclusively on the Criminal Connection podcast. There's 8 episodes. Make sure you tune in and get involved. Chapter 3, The Scene. I've been thinking for a while about putting together a magazine. Not least of all because it seemed like the most obvious ideas in the history of obvious ideas. I knew all the promoters and everyone connected to the scene, and I had a good reputation that was growing all the time. There was definitely room for a magazine about raving. And it would give us something else to offer the promoters that we work for. Genius idea, if I may say so myself. Pages of listings, happenings, opinions, reviews. People could advertise in it, and it would be something that all the clubbers would want to read. The reason for the magazine was so that you didn't need to go to a club or a record store to find out what events were on. Everything you needed would be within these pages. That wasn't my only motivation. There was this bloke called Ralph from Birmingham. He was around 5 feet tall, always eat off his face, and he wore this ridiculous beret. Imagine Danny DeVito doing an impression of Frank Spencer at a rave, and you'd almost be there. I don't know, there was something about him. He was never quite right. For someone so into the scene, he never looked like he belonged. He had a flying company and a ticket outlet called Oracle, who joined forces with no other than our friends, the Flying Squad, to cover the rest of the country. Ralph and me had what you'd accurately describe as a hate-hate relationship, which could only ever get worse. It didn't intentionally start out that way. It was just me and the lads taking a piss out of his beret every time we saw him, shouting things like, "Power to the people." For all you Citizen Smith fans out there, you'll get that joke. For some reason, it really got to him and upset him. We would have probably stopped and moved on to another target if he hadn't reacted so badly. It's the first rule you learn in school, right? If they're getting to you, don't show it. Perhaps Ralph had never been to school. Anyway, we kept taking the piss out of him and his magical beret, and the hatred really started, probably fueled by his association with the Flying Squad. He used to slag us off to promoters, so then we take the piss out of him even more. He talked to more people, blah, 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 until it got ridiculous. I remember one night, one of my mates swiped his red beret when he was wearing it and legged it. He came storming up to me, ranting that someone from the Turbo Promotions team had gone too far this time and stolen his beret. He demanded it back immediately. Ralph, I said, I haven't got a fucking Scooby. What you on about? But what the boys get up to on a night other than give out the flyers is up to them. "Where's my fucking beret?" he shouted. "I don't know. And I don't give a fuck," I said. To be honest, I wouldn't even piss on it if it was on fire. This was an unfortunate thing to say because actually his beret was on fire. Ralph suddenly screamed and pointed behind me. I turned. They've all stood behind us in a circle, 10 blokes and 5 girls, all in bright red Turbo Promotions jackets, dancing around his beret, which was well and truly on fire, burning away like a sacrifice to the rave gods. I couldn't help but laugh. And Ralphie boy didn't see the funny side. I think there was a special connection between him and the beret. "That's it," he snarled. "Ooh," was their handbaggedly camp reply. He stormed off with all of us shouting, "Hats it," to each other. Oh, it's childish, but it was funny. That's what, though, all right? I mean, his hat got cremated and we'd had a laugh at his expense, but no one got hurt, so I didn't see it was going to be that much of a problem. I knew that I'd have been annoyed too, but also knew I'd have seen the funny side of it. There's a lot more problems in the world than a burnt beret. The next morning, we were outside the club flying when our mate Ralph came out with some peeled up called Paul, the editor of a self-styled controversial dance magazine called Eternity. Both were bouncing around with glow sticks, tops off, stinking of Vicks, vapor rub, gurning away like the biggest rave cliche you could possibly imagine. Me being me, I just couldn't resist another wind-up. "Where's your beret, Wolfie?" I asked with a boyish giggle. He told me to fuck and Paul stepped in with, "Do you know who I am?" "You're a idiot, that's who you are," I said. "Now put your top back on before you catch cold, before you really need to use some Vicks." "I'm the editor of Eternity magazine," he said. Bounced around in my face, going like, I don't know what he told me or how he thought I'd react. And my comeback was, "I don't care if you're the editor of the News of the fucking World. One thing's for sure, you really are a fucking idiot. And if you're a magazine editor, what are you doing getting off your face in a fucking rave?" "I'm going to destroy you," he started saying. "I'm going to finish you and your business." These were very bold words, but words I'd heard too many times already. And to be honest, I find idle threats a bit boring. "Look," I said, "if you want a row, I'll smash you and this other cunt up and we can all go home. Otherwise, fucking do one." They done one and I forgot about the whole incident. Until a good mate of mine, Murray Beatson, rest in peace, Murray, who owned Dreamscape, phoned me up a month or two later. "You want to get your hands on Eternity magazine's latest edition, Terry," he said. "There's something in there you should see. You won't believe it even after you've read it." I was intrigued, so I jumped in the motor and spent the next 6 hours driving around looking for a copy in the newsagents. Fucking typical. I found the award-winning magazine in a pokey little corner shop on the outskirts of nowhere. After almost a tank full of petrol, I chuckled at the irony. The dance music Bible not stocked in any major newsagents, but out in the sticks in a local shop for local ravers. Sitting in the car, I opened it up and started at the beginning with the editorial. I couldn't make any sense of it at all. He was trying to be all abstract and new agey in a post-modernist, up-your-own-arse sort of style. This lasted for 2 pages and was the biggest pile of pretentious bollocks I've ever read. By the time I got to the end, I wasn't sure whether I was being insulted or not. That all changed when I flicked through to the centre pages. Fucking hell, the centre spread was a double-page hatchet job on me and Turbo Promotions. It was a no-holds-barred attack. Mo was right. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was absolutely fucking fuming. It said I was a disgrace to the rave scene, a hooligan, and I was doing everything the wrong way, and the promoters shouldn't let people like me hand out their flyers. People like me, I was a raver to the soles of my feet. I loved the scene, and if I'd not been in it, business-wise, I'd have definitely been in there with my whistle and my Vicks Vapor Rub. Granted, we all had skinheads and we all looked a bit scary, but we were totally professional. We always provided a good service, and he had all right reasons to call me a hooligan or cast aspersions on my business methods. Apart from anything else, him and his little brummy mate with a dodgy beret were the ones that were always f***ed off their heads on drugs every event. So I did the right thing. I phoned all the promoters and asked them what it was all about and to get their opinions on it. They thought whoever wrote it was as mad as a bag of snakes. So it wasn't just me. So I called Paul up and let him and Ralph know that if I ever saw either of them again, they would be likely to have a serious accident. And that was it. They pushed me too far, and I was prepared to smash them up to prove they couldn't go around pulling such shit on me. My blood was fucking boiling. A few days later, I got a letter from them saying that they told the police and they'd taped the threatening phone call. So if anything did happen to either of them, I'd get arrested. Nobody likes the grass. I backed off, calmed down, and took the proverbial chill pill. I probably wouldn't have done anything to anyone. I mean, I was a pair of mugs, but I just wanted to vent my anger. The fact that they bricked it and gone to the old bill was good enough for me. They'd always be watching their backs in future too. A nice little bit of mental torture to throw into the mix. Murray advised me to leave it there. Keep doing what you're doing, because they're only jealous of you, he said. And that is the best way of fighting back. And his words still ring true today, you know. These were wise words, and they were the final push I needed to start my own magazine. If those two clowns could run a magazine, I was certain I could. I sat down, I thought it all through properly, deciding on the amount of time and money available to put it together and how much I'd need to take in order for it to earn money. With an idea of page numbers and dimensions, I was able to work out how many adverts I would need to put in there and how much there was to be made out of doing a magazine. So my first steps was to ring around, ask all the promoters if they would be interested in advertising in my magazine. And most of them said yes. It seemed viable, double checked, it still seemed viable. I set to work on it, and the result was the birth of the Scene magazine. Another one of my ventures that started out relatively small, but with big plans. First up, it was a small A5 sized black and white magazine featuring listings, regular features, reviews, interviews. If I say it myself, it was a good read. Meanwhile, things could only get better. A lot fucking better. Murray Beatson told me a very interesting story. After a month after the double-page expose on the evil Dr. Turbo, Paul, the editor of Eternity, had gone a bit potty. He'd sat at home taking LSD for 2 days on the trot, which is bad enough in itself, but then the etiquette guru of the rave scene had gone on to snort and smoke every other substance he could lay his hands on and got so off his face that his trip went a bit paranoid. I say a bit paranoid. He went out to his driveway and smashed his cars up on the drive, and then when his wife came out, he smashed her up. I'm pretty sure none of us would condone domestic violence against women. His wife phoned Murray up during all this because she didn't know what else to do. While she was on the phone to Murray, Paul went back into the house and smashed that up too. She was so scared and had no choice but to call the police, who arrived and arrested him. I was so happy when I heard all this. I wrote a big spread for the scene along the lines of attorney editor takes drugs, goes apeshit, smashes his own house up. That really was poetic justice. Instant karma. You usually expect those types to get done over because of all the enemies they make, but you don't expect them to do it to themselves. Fucking priceless and controversial. Even better, the icing on the cake was their magazine went bust, owing thousands of pounds all over the place. I know it's childish, but we couldn't let that one pass either without giving it a special mention either. The Scene magazine set up an Eternity magazine memorial fund. It is with great sadness that we have to bring all the Scene readers some very disturbing news. Eternity magazine has now become a thing of the past. They have gone bust owing £250,000. Here at the Scene magazine, we feel that without Eternity magazine, the whole of the rave scene will fall apart. Just think of all the poor ravers that used to read the introduction and think, what the f*** are they going on about? F*** them. We could wind them up even more, then I was f***ing bang up for that and a happier man. And the Scene magazine was all about taking a piss anyway. It had silly articles and jokes and was never intended to be anything you take seriously. I never set out to produce a controversial dance magazine. It was just a pocket-sized mag that would give people a laugh but would also keep them up to date on all the happenings in the rave world. It ran for quite some time and became very popular. As it took off, it helped me fund other projects and ran parallel with my events when I went into promoting. When One Nation was eventually set up, the Scene was synonymous with it, and they were a great combination because with raves being a monthly thing to begin with, I could concentrate on the magazine in my spare time, assuming I ever had any. Having both of them running gave me the foothold I'd been looking for. It was a good move, establishing my name and status before promoting. Going from Turbo Promotions to the Scene magazine and then on to One Nation will give me quite a powerful position within the rave scene. People already saw me as a driving force and took notice of what I was doing. I even had my mum in the magazine with a regular feature as Auntie Trisha. She was a mental agony aunt who just talked a load of bollocks and answered everybody's rave problems. We used to get people to write in, and the maddest letter we received, one, an Auntie Trisha Solved My Problem t-shirt. We'd have letters like this. Dear Auntie Trisha, my mother-in-law was a witch. She lived with me and my wife. She nagged and moaned at me constantly for the 20 years she lived with us. She never let me watch football or action films. She made me do the washing up every night and also take the dog out for a walk. Everything I did was wrong and she thought she was always right. Eventually I couldn't take anymore. So I killed her, hacked up her body, put it in a bin liner and threw it in the Thames. Do you think I overreacted? That was one sent in by someone calling himself Mr. N. Bates. It was this kind of silliness that I loved and encouraged. We also had a page which was dedicated to ravers that were off their faces called Gurner of the Month, which was always a crowd pleaser. So we encouraged people to send in photos of their mates in a state when they were absolutely mashed, and we print them. It was so funny. I even had a few of me in there. My favourites were when someone had fallen asleep and their mates would put them in these mad positions, dress them up, put makeup on them, shave something off. They always had me laughing like a lunatic. We also had another column called Mystic Peg. She's off her head. It was a horoscope column where she just spurted a load of complete and utter nonsense. There were also regular columns from DJs and MCs. There was interviews and reviews of all the latest events. I like to add articles that were about nothing at all. So you get to the end of it and wonder why the you just wasted 5 minutes reading it. I think the humour was quite a reaction to Ralph and Paul's self-indulgent drivel. I've always found that pointless humour makes you laugh, whereas pointless pretension just bores you rigid. People wanted to be entertained, and I wanted a magazine that could make people laugh instead of being felt like they were being patronised or alienated. Danielle and Rochelle were two lady DJs who worked for me on the magazine. They write articles on up-and-coming acts and interview anyone in the club scene they wanted to. And as an editor, I'd okay everything before they did it and see if it was worthy of publication. Really just to make sure they were on the right lines, which they always were. It helped that they were already on the scene and knew what they were talking about. I think one of the best things about the Scene magazine was their legendary trips abroad. With Britain being the birthplace of raving, lots of promoters would get called up and asked to fly off somewhere and sprinkle a little bit of their magic promoting dust on some foreign clubs. With the flying and the tickets and now the Scene magazine going strong, we'd often get invited along. The promoter would just add a few of us to his entourage, foreigners would pick up the bill, and we'd print a nice big feature about the event when we got home. I think you'd call it a win-win-win. We went all over the place. We went to Canada, Switzerland, Tenerife, Ibiza, Ayia Napa, just to name a few. My mate Chris Brown had recently set up a dance music event called United Dance. And within no time, they blew up. Mainly because of Chris's commitment to the scene. He knew what he was doing. He wasn't one of these rave cowboys who just wanted to bleed the scene dry in a year and then fuck off. He was in it because he loved it and was keen to see it evolve. After months of battling the council to get a licence, he started out putting events on at the Stevenage Arts and Leisure Centre. This held 3,000 people. Later on, he merged with Temptation before setting up home in Bagley's Film Studios. I actually remember a trip to Canada with United Dance. We flew in from Gatwick Airport. I know we upset a load of passengers on the way out. And when we touched down in Toronto, we were ready for action. It was fucking mental. There was me, Chris Brown, DJ Slipmat, Bradley Carter, Gabby, Maxine, Bellino, DJ Dougal, DJ Cy, Vinyl Groover, and LSD. We were met off the plane by a host, Mark and Shannon. They already knew what to expect, and I think we definitely exceeded their expectations within the first minute of meeting them. Once outside the airport, there was this massive stretch limo waiting for someone. Jokingly, I hatched a plan to hijack the thing by acting as though it was for us, and we knew all about it. So we marched over and told the driver to start loading their bags into the boot to make it snappy. Okay then, put them in a fucking trunk and make it snappy, for fuck's sake. Mark and Shannon tried to intervene, but we kept talking over the top of them and shushing them. Well, you know what we were doing? We had it all under control. With the trunk loaded up, we instructed him to take us to the finest hotel in all the land. He looked over to Mark as if to say, who the fuck are these English loonies? Mark just shrugged and opened the door for us. Come on, get in. We're going to the Days Inn. Probably not the finest, but still pretty good. We all paused for a second as it dawned on us the limo was actually for us. I could hardly believe it, and the shame of it hushed us until the first bottle of bubbly was popped. The limo was like a nightclub on wheels, huge and luxurious, top of the range, 5 stars, no expense spared, VIP treatment. Everything we wanted was in there waiting for us. Pizza, vodka, beer, champagne, more pizza, more beer, more vodka, the lot. One of the lads wanted a bit of puff, so Mark delved into a bag and pulled out an ounce. No questions asked. There you go, mate, have that. The Canadians really knew how to treat their guests. The guilt overcome me, so I sort of apologised for a silly behaviour and just played it down like we knew the limo was for us in the first place. And boy, were we grateful. It was the best greeting we could have hoped for. It was actually really easy to forget why we were there. Looking out the window, there was Toronto whizzing past, and we were in a limo being paid for by someone who paid to fly us all out there to have fun. Don't forget, I'm some geezer from the old Dean Council estate who's been made redundant. If I'd have thought too hard about the situation, it would have been too humbling, and I'd have ended up behaving myself, which just wouldn't have been on. I had to savour and enjoy this moment. Supposedly, we were there to promote and put our face to raves, but our main plan was just to have a good time and bag as many freebies as possible. Half cut and no doubt jet lagged, we dropped our cases off at the hotel and went straight out to see what was happening. The club promoter sent a girl along called Jennifer to the hotel to look after us and make sure we didn't get lost or arrested before the event. She took us around all the touristy places and to all the best shops, stock up on some designer gear. Back then, shopping was amazing over there. Everything was less than half price. And back then, Tommy Hilfiger was a massive thing. And literally, they had the best piece of Tommy Hilfiger that money could buy. It was actually a bit embarrassing, really, because you feel guilty like you were stealing from them. A £50 T-shirt in the UK could be picked up in Toronto for around £20. Back home, you couldn't even pick up Moody gear for those prices. Once we discovered the actual Tommy Hilfiger shop, we practically cleaned it out. It was like Mr. Hilfiger himself had puked all over us. We were covered from head to toe. The rave itself was fantastic. It was held in this like massive off warehouse, and it was absolutely packed with tens of thousands of people, all off their nuts. I wasn't too sure what to expect, but it was just like going to an English rave, but without all the muggers and dickheads. Every one of us was up for a good night, and the atmosphere was indescribable. Like the whole of Toronto's party people had turned up to see us, all dressed to impress. A large number of very fucking fit young Canadian women got their asses banged off from in the bogs. They were queuing up for it, and we were just kept well supplied with champagne and drugs. Some geezer who was an associate of the promoter was walking around our group, and he had a record bag full of tablets. There must have been 10,000 pills in there. He opened his bag and was just saying, "I'll grab some." So everyone's like, "Oh, how much do you want from him?" And he's like, no, have as many as you want. So people were just like grabbing handfuls of these pills, and he just wouldn't take payment, right? So he kept saying, no, it's on me, it's there, it's that, blah, blah. So everybody just went fucking nuts. So we stayed there until sort of 6:30 in the morning, called the limo and got pissed on the way back to the hotel, where we found Slipmat, the legendary DJ, who snuck home early in bed with a couple of naked girls. The godfather of hardcore had been partying hard, and he was now fast asleep, as were the two women. But he'd obviously gone first. They covered him in green nail varnish, lipstick, eyeshadow, and some nice-looking home-drawn tattoos. There was a smiley face drawn on his face, and United Dancing Canada scrawled across his side. Concerned for him, we did what any real friends would do. We took photos. The next day saw some rather green faces emerge from the rooms. None green in the Slipmat's boat. He also discovered a pile of light bulbs next to his bed that had been nicked in his drunken state, leaving a trail of darkness throughout the hotel to his room. After some more sightseeing and 20 gallons of water each, we went clubbing at the Industry, got pissed up on some really strong cider, and ended up tripping our tits off by accident, honest. A tourist guide asked me and Matt if we wanted some mushroom tea. You know what the English are like for drinking tea? We thought this was just some hippie herbal shit, not actual magic mushrooms. Half an hour later, we were roaming the streets on trams, buzzing like fuck, trying to find something to do. The day before we left, one of the lads ended up shagging this girl who, to put it bluntly, was a fucking skaghead. He was married, which was bad enough, but I was there to work and play, not to be a fucking marriage counsellor. I just told him to use protection if he was going to shag her in a dick, and left it at that. It's not like he'd fucking shag a junkie at home, so knows why I wanted to shag one just because she had a different accent. He told me he did it without a condom, and I told him he was fucking stupid. But as boys do, we took the piss out of him. In EastEnders at the time, there was an actor that played the character of Mark Fowler who had HIV, and it was a big part of the storyline. So from then on, my nameless friend was known as Mark Fowler. It wasn't till the flight home that the shit really did hit his fan. He started complaining that his cock was on fire and his bollocks were going to explode. I'm not kidding. I was crying with laughter. Turned out he'd somehow caught his nuts on something when he was banging her, so it wasn't the pox after all. F*** knows if he ever told his wife. There was another night at clubbing the following night, but it was my turn to be the lightweight of the group. I turned in early, only to be woken up at 6 a.m. with 12 geezers jumping up and down on my bed. It was annoying, but it just meant that I got up and joined in the party and could then annoy everybody else when they eventually burnt out. Once they crashed out, I sneaked out of them, went to the shops and bought tons of fruit and veg. I borrowed a table from reception and set up a market stall outside their room. It was all set out perfectly. I went back in and dragged the others outside. As soon as they clapped eyes on my pitch, they pissed themselves laughing. I borrowed a bum bag from someone to wear so I looked like an authentic market stall holder. And I started shouting things like, get your oranges, 5 for a pound. Some of the people staying in the hotel even stopped by to buy some fruit off me. Well, he started losing it a bit with all the drugs, the booze and no sleep. I remember LSD somehow got himself into another dimension where he started thinking he was James Bond. He was walking around Toronto with an imaginary gun pulling 007 poses. The Canadians were like, who is this crazy Englishman? Being the degenerate pop stars that we were, we smashed our hotel rooms up like we were in the Who or something, ordered huge meals, steaks, pizzas, wine on room service, and hardly ever touched them. Towards the end of our stay, it did all go tits up. The guys told Chris that he owed them around $3.5 for all the extras. That was a lot of money, especially 30 years ago or more. What do you mean $3.5 he asked? It turned out they wanted weighing in for all the fucking ease and the puff and all the champagne and all the drugs everyone was taking. Because Chris was the promoter behind it, they went to him for the money, but they picked on the wrong guy. Okay, everyone had been taking liberties and necking as many drugs as possible, smashing rooms up on the tape for the whole week, and it had obviously mounted up. But f*** that. We'd been told it was all free. Now it seemed that all expenses included means you can have anything you want, but you got to fucking pay for it. We told them in no uncertain terms that we weren't paying for any of it, and they stormed off angry and threatening. We made some inquiries, and it turned out that these geezers were connected to a very serious family, if you know what I mean. Being in a foreign country and upsetting those kinds of people is the last thing anyone wants to do. It wasn't like we could just get on the blower to one of my mates and ask them to come and help out. With some big-time geezers breathing down our necks for this money, and us being in an unfamiliar country, we did what any other normal human being would do. Went down the road to the martial arts shop, got tooled up and bought a couple of samurai swords. Fuck it, we're going down fighting. All of us were completely ninjaed up. I seriously thought it was going to come to that too. And I don't mind admitting I was fucking worried. In Canada, these guys have guns, after all. They weren't just going to have a roll around on the floor with us. VIP security services have been established for 35 years. VIP security offers a personal security service to escort you, your family and your friends, whether on business or out for the evening. Protect what's important to you. We're watching you while others are watching us. Prevention is always better than the cure. You're in safe hands. Security solutions across Essex, London and the home counties. I didn't really relax until we'd gone through the check-in at the airport. We managed to flee the country without having to pull any Kill Bill shit. Word had got back to England before we did. As soon as we touched down, there were calls from people wanting to know what we'd fucking done. Apparently we'd upset the entire of the Canadian rave scene and their financial backers. Interestingly, the main geezer who put the event on was found dead at the end of a rope a few months after our visit. He borrowed a lot of money to put that party on and couldn't pay it back. Whether he hanged himself or someone did it for him, it was a horrible way to go. If it was the result of him crossing his friends, we could have ended up the same way. That was a close call. As soon as we got home, we were airborne again. Heading fried beef with M8 magazine, United Dance and the Drone Club from Birkenhead. It was fucking awesome. 9 days of mentalism. There was the M8 night with DJs Joe Deacon and George Bowie, QFX, Bass Instinct, Mikey B, Tizer, and a DJ from Hamburg called DJ Miss Nick. The scene had their own night with Slipmat, Dougal, Brisk, Vinyl Groover and MCMC. The Drome had DJ Trix, Christian, MC Cyanide and a DJ from Germany called Westbam. United Dance had every DJ perform on one night, and M8 hosted a scratch DJ competition. The last night was set aside for the Club Chaos resident DJs to have a go. The usual silliness happened. We were drinking all kinds of mad cocktails and getting into scrapes every day and night. We really were the typical daft English lads abroad. The difference was that we got VIP treatment everywhere we went. We really did take the piss out of that kind hospitality once again. Vowing that this would be the last time. So we might as well go all out, which was stupid. Well, you only live once. The girls out there were mad for it. We shagged anything that moved, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time. And we drank gallons of champagne, bottles of spirits, and generally had the most degenerate, wasted week in a bit of our lives. As the Scene magazine grew, it went from a 16-page black and white skeleton into a full-colour 128-page magazine with UK-wide distribution. I started thinking more and more about promoting. I knew I had all the tools. I could flyer, sell tickets, promoting the magazine. I had contacts with the DJs, the MCs. I knew hundreds of ravers. What was I waiting for? Chapter 4, One Nation, the early days. Well, it ain't that fucking easy. Yes, I had all the tools to get it up and going. Okay, I was a novice and I didn't have the know-how. But if you've got the drive and ambition to set yourself off, the rest usually falls into place. You need to believe in yourself and push yourself constantly. And this is where I gave myself another push and got my arse into gear. There was just one problem. Running big events costs lots of bread. And there's a risk you can lose it all. I had no capital to put in and no business plan. So it was pointless going to the bank for a loan. But Lady Luck was looking down on me again. And it was around mid-1993. I got together with a couple of geezers called Andy and Mark, who had a little pirate radio station. Now, Andy was a geezer on my old council estate, and Mark was just out of the jail for ringing cars. They were really keen to get into promoting raves, and they asked me if they could get involved. They said they bankrolled the whole project and gave me free rein to do whatever I thought was right. And when you're offered an opportunity like that, you have to take it with both hands. We were all taking a risk, really. I mean, I had no real track record, and they were investing 10 or 15 grand. I needed a name, something that would sum up my experience of the rave scene. And I was listening to this old funkadelic track, and it was called One Nation Under a Groove. When it suddenly hit me, One Nation, perfect. And that was how One Nation was born. To get the flyers designed, I called a designer called Junior Tomlin. I said, create something showing people with candles on their heads. I don't know where this inspiration come from. I've no idea. I just wanted to have something a little bit off the wall and freaky to grab people's attention. I'm sure it did. I mean, the flyers look fucking brilliant. The first One Nation was at the Roller Express in Edmonton on the 11th of December, 1993. It wasn't the best area of London, but it was an amazing venue. The legal capacity was around 3,000, but at a push you could get 3,500 or even 4,000 in there if you had to. I copied a few other people's ideas at first, putting together some lights, some lasers, good sound systems, and a decent DJ lineup playing a mix of hardcore, drum and bass, all in one arena. And then I went out and worked my arse off flyering it for a couple of months leading up to the event. There was a lot of nerves. How would it go? Would there be any problems? Will people have a good time? Will they want to come back? We charged £12 in advance and £20 on the door. And I remember on that first event, walking around almost in a daze. I didn't know whether to dance or do what. We ended up having 1,100 people in, which was basically around the break-even point. It wasn't great, but to not lose any money and break even on that date was a bloody good start. Our second event was at the same place, and it was a sellout, and we made a profit, but not as much as we should have done because we got ripped off in the cash box. I was on the stage emceeing, MC Free and Easy, and all the other partners are supposed to be watching the door, counting the money, counting the tickets, and make sure it was all coming in. But Andy was rolling around on the floor after he'd had a handful of these, gurning his head off, and Mark was on the stage drinking beers, trying to impress birds, saying that he's this big rave promoter with his Peter Stringfellow act. So hang about, who the was in the cash box? I asked Mark. Oh, it's cool, mate, he said. The venue have got the cash box sorted. We knew the guy they stuck in there. Oh, well, if he's in there then, hang on, if he's in the cash box, then we're fucked. Everyone and their granny knew this guy and knew he had extremely sticky fingers. He was a nice guy in his own way, but he was a weaselly little fucker with messy hair like a white afro. But he just could not keep his hands to himself. It wasn't just us. I was there a few weeks later at another event, and he did the same thing, and the promoter ended up punching the geezer in the face and knocking his teeth out. Everybody said he was on the take. Don't let that fucker touch your dough. So we were warned, and sure enough, we came up short. When the money was counted, when the tickets were counted, and I had a fair idea where it had gone, but we couldn't prove fuck all. That was a big warning bell for me with Mark and Andy. There was no organisation or control. What's the point in setting up something and getting off your tits and then trusting a thief to handle your money? I mean, it's fucking dumb, right? We ran a third event there as a May Day night party, and it did okay, but we weren't setting Clubland alight. After that one, Mark decided, he could do a better job organisationally than me. He said he wanted more of a hands-on role, and it was his cash, so I couldn't really argue. Right from the off, the omens for the fourth night weren't good. His flyers looked like your granny had done them on an iPad. He picked all the DJs himself, and it was just people he liked, including at least one girl DJ that he was desperate to get hold of. He paid no attention to what the punters wanted or even liked. And also, like the Albert Einstein he was, he put the event on the same night as Elevation. Now, at that time, Elevation was the biggest event in London. So this was like committing commercial suicide. Predictably, the party was shit and he lost money. Worst of all, it was still under the One Nation name, which I didn't like because it was my fucking name. And now I was handing it over to this guy for him to basically fuck it up and make a mess of it. I said I'd do the next event, but Mark was adamant he'd do it his way again. I was going to walk away at this point, but morbid curiosity kept me on board. He hadn't learned his lesson. He arranged the next party for the week after a bank holiday when everyone had already gone out and spent all their money and wouldn't be going out for a couple of weeks. I actually couldn't work out whether he was a bit mental or just fucking stupid. It would have been a brave thing to take on a big event if he was aware of it. But doing something straight after a load of big events over a bank holiday was the most dim-witted decision I'd ever heard. I take it you've heard of the X Factor. This was the why the factor. Why the would anybody do such a thing? He just wasn't switched on to what was happening. So he waded in without a clue and lost money each and every time. And there he was on the stage scratching his head, wondering why. And the sad thing was he couldn't see any of it. Rule number one, whoever you are, you cannot promote a rave unless you're passionate and knowledgeable about the rave scene. And if you're one down step from the village idiot, you certainly can't. To adapt a well-known phrase, he can organise a rave in a dance club. All he really wanted to was make money, give it large and be a big club promoter. And the same went for Andy. Yeah, he just wanted to get off his head. There's only so much fucking everything up that even really dense people can take before they work out they're not cut out for something. And eventually they realised they were in the wrong game. So they call up a meeting. We want to call it a day, said Mark. Thank for that. If they carried on as they were, they would absolutely be in more debt than fucking Ethiopia. Okay, chaps, I said, all amicable. I understand your position. I'm going to carry on with One Nation on my own then. No, you're fucking not, said Mark. If you want to carry on, you can buy the business off me. Buy what fucking business off you, mate? I said. You've run a few shitty events which got shitter after you asked me to step aside. There's actually nothing to buy. It's fucking worthless. It degenerated into a big row. He was adamant I couldn't just go away and run One Nation events on my own. And I was adamant he was a and I could and I would. First you took me off what I was doing, I said. You got me into this promoting and now you don't want to do it, that's fine. Second, One Nation is my fucking brand name, not yours. So fuck you. I'm going it alone, and if I'm going to fund it and do it myself, what's it to you? They weren't having it. So laid it on the line. Look, we can either do this like adults or we can sort it out the naughty way. You can get whoever you want and I'll get whoever I want. We'll meet up, we'll sort it out, and whoever wins ends up with a name. I was bluffing at the time, but they didn't call me, and I walked away grinning and whistling to myself. Funny enough, I bumped into Andy 3 or 4 years ago, and he said, you must owe us some money for One Nation. And I was like, are you off your fucking head, mate? You just sit in a corner off your fucking nut. Mark put the money in, but did fuck all else. I actually did all the fucking hard work. I come up with the name, I dug the fucking holes. And yeah, of course I've made money, but I've also lost money too. But whatever I've done after you guys fucked off, I've done on my own. So go fuck yourself. It had all been a bit of a disaster in one way, but in another, it had been a great experience. I'd learned so many lessons and made a lot of mistakes at Mark's expense. First off, the fucking cash box. I said the fucking cash box Repeat 1,000 times until it's in your thick skull. That is the golden rule. Always, always have someone in there. And never let anyone you can't trust with your life take your money. Second, dates. Don't try to go up against the biggest people in the scene. And don't try to run events when everybody's pissed their last penny up the wall. Third, organisation. Plan, plan, plan. Know exactly how much you're going to spend and what you're going to spend it on and exactly how many people you need to break even. Fourth, the event. It's no fucking good relying on the club's lights and getting one poxy laser in. Your light show doesn't have to be a religious experience, but you need smoke. Lots of lasers, lots of lights, and lots of extra lights. People need to know that they're at an event. Same goes for the sound system. Bring your own bass bins. Amp it up. Bring your own decks. If you're not sure the club can give you what you need, hire it in. Fifth, DJs. Don't book a load of idiots just because they're your mates, or women DJs because they've got nice asses or you want to shag them. Book the DJs the punters want to hear. And last, but by no means least, naughtiness, free ecstasy and speed, limitless booze and underdressed birds will be everywhere. But remember, you're the fucking promoter now, not a punter. I'd be lying if I said that in the early days, I didn't bend a few birds over in the bogs and give them a good scene to. Or take the odd job here and there. It was all part of being a club promoter. Some beautiful young girl comes up to you with cleavage everywhere, a short skirt, long legs, heels, and whispers in her ears that she swallows. What are you going to do? But if I was going to do this professionally, I had to cut down on that. And after seeing Andy in action, I had to forget all about partying, having fun, drinking. This was all a no-no. This was work. All good stuff. The only problem was I still didn't have the capital needed to run events on my own. Turbo Promotions was going from strength to strength, and I was making more money from that than I did from any of my other old 4 jobs put together. But it's one thing having a nice regular income. It's another having the wedge needed to slap down on the table to put on a big party. I got lucky again in 1994 with some friends of mine, John and Andrew Searchfield, bought a Sharon and Tracy nightclub, which is what we used to call them, in the centre of Aldershot, the home of the British Army. They kitted it out and renamed it the Rhythm Station. They were the only club in the Thames Valley with a late licence, and it was open till 6 in the morning. And they asked me to come on and be their promoter. It was the perfect place to make my mark and build up my brand and make my name and travel a little bit further along that learning curve. First up, I run a regular jungle night. It was fucking awesome. Everybody who was into jungle will remember. We had Mickey Finn, Fabio, Groove Rider, Top Buzz. I mean, real top of the ladder DJs. Fabio and Groove Rider would be plugging it on their Radio 1 show. I mean, it was such a coup to get such an amazing lineup together with dancers, and everybody used to travel from such a long way away. The club only held 1,000 people, but the atmosphere, it was second to none. And I'd say it was probably one of the best club nights I've ever experienced. Jungle had spun out of the London clubs a couple of years earlier as a reaction to the commercialisation of rave music. They took the tempo from 120 beats per minute to 145 beats per minute and basically sampled and got their influences from massive reggae artists rather than from house. Eventually it diversified into drum and bass as we know it today. But back then, jungle was massive. With the Searchfields happy to pay the bills, I was able to plan the events just how I wanted them. For a while, it ran like a dream. And one reason it worked so well was that unlike a lot of other fly-by-night promoters of that time, I really cared and gave a shit about giving the punters the best night I possibly could. The biggest hurdle in starting a club night is building up a following and a reputation. Once a punter buys into you and buys into what you're doing, then you're on the right road. I was filling the place up every week by delivering the best DJs, the best service, the best lights, the best sound I could every week in and out. We had some great nights. Although I was the promoter, a lot of the hassle and pressure of running the event itself was down to the club. My deal was I made £1 per head. All I needed to do was have one guy on the door with a clicker. Not that I didn't trust John and Andrew. It was just something I had to do after the second event at the Roller Express. I didn't get paid my money until Monday, which allowed me to drop my guard and relax a little bit and have a few drinks and actually enjoy my Friday and Saturday nights while we fucked around behind the decks and pretty much annoyed everybody in the venue. One night, fed up with me behaving like a drunken arsehole, somebody thought it'd be really funny to spike my drink. 1 minute, everything's okay. Next, everything's going very wobbly. I walked outside because I didn't feel right. I sat in the car and I opened the door and I actually started throwing up out the side of the car. And people are pulling up at the car park because it was like 2 a.m. going, all right, Tell, and walking off, shaking their heads, thinking, oh, fucking hell, he's on one. They must have just thought I was a fucking right degenerate. I'm the promoter and here I am, smashed the pieces out of my fucking mind and thrown my fucking guts up in the car park. I came back in and sat at the back groaning. And I remember there was a DJ called DJ Swift. He was this big black guy and he just kept taking the piss. Can't hold your drink, Tell. He had this like fucking mad Frank Bruno laugh. So I just said to him, why don't you fuck off or I'll never book you again? And he was like, I mean, we were ram full every single weekend. But with anything, it's hard to sustain that level of interest for a long period of time. And with club goers, you know, they're a particularly fickle bunch. You know, you go to the same club all the time. And sooner or later, you want to go somewhere else. Something else happens. Something else opens. You want to check it out. And eventually, it dies off. We were ending up with sort of 300 or 400 people in, which wasn't enough. I had a meeting with John and Andrew and I went, look, Tell, we're paying for the flies and stuff. We're losing money. Can't carry on. We need to bring money in. So we're going to, you know, have to hire the club out to other promoters and try and do our own thing, you know. And to be honest, that made sense. You know, they could make money from the hire fee and they still keep all the bar, but they don't have any of the risk. So I got why they did it. And as more promoters came in, they elbowed me out of the picture. I mean, I wasn't bitter. I had a good year there, you know, but they were as low as they could have been and they kept me there as long as they could. And they always paid me and I thank them both for that opportunity. And, you know, we all have to earn money, so I could understand their decision. And to be honest, I had no hard feelings. They carried on for a few years doing really well for themselves until the police found drugs were being sold there and they got stopped from doing raves. Nothing to do with John and Andrew. They just owned the nightclub. And they had no idea about the drug dealing that was going on inside the club. But that was that. They eventually refurbed it and turned it back into a Sharon and Tracy nightclub called Cheeks. I know, it's a fucking terrible name. But I owe those boys a lot. When you look back on something like that in hindsight, it's actually quite good that they stopped me doing that because then that made me focus on doing my own larger scale events. Otherwise, I think I would have just stayed there for another year and just kept taking that money every week. It was actually making me lazy. I still say today that I owed those guys a lot. Without them, there would never have been a Club One Nation weekly event. They backed me when I had no money, and I'll always be grateful to them. I had one early go on my own. I got involved with this fat bastard from South London who said he let me have a club in the West End, really cheap. Only problem was the club would only let me sell a certain amount of tickets up front, and he'd sell the rest on the door. Plus, I couldn't take my own security firm in, and I couldn't have anyone in the cash box. This guy would handle all that. What a lovely man. Looking back, it couldn't have been any more fucking obvious. He may as well have been wearing a fucking stocking over his head and carrying a sack with swag written on it. But I either went with his terms or I didn't have an event. And I was pretty desperate at the time. I get to do a solo gig under my belt and remember my 6 rules from earlier on. Now I had a 7th. Tickets. By selling the majority on the door, he was able to reuse them and let people back in through the back doors. And obviously we had no security. They're policing it. So when the rave was in full swing, it was a great night atmosphere-wise, but there was more fucking skimming going on than a squad of fucking plasterers. Fucking hell. I mean, he must have took me for 5 or 8 grand that night. There wasn't much I could do about it. I mean, I still earned a good money. In me accepting Fatty's deal, I effectively allowed this bird from the cash box to take the tickets and their security to recycle them out to the doorman who he sold them outside and was putting the money in their pockets. I mean, this stuff is so fucking obvious. But if you're not aware of it, you're not aware of it. But I was. There was still the right number of tickets behind the desk at the end of the night. Piece of piss. And I had no way of checking up. I worked my nuts off, filled the club to capacity and beyond, as it turned out. And they got all the bar takings, the money I paid for the venue hire, and they still felt obliged that they needed to fucking shaft me. I confronted the guy. I said, "You're a fucking cunt. You've ripped me off." And he's all calm with his door team behind him. "You know, don't fucking accuse me," he said. "Where's your proof?" He was right. I hadn't got any. I did. I knew what he was fucking doing, but I couldn't actually prove it. And I said to him, I said, "I know you've ripped me off. You clipped me in the fucking eyes and shake my hand, but I'll never work with you again, you cunt." And I walked off. And I was pretty fucking low about that night. But again, I was still learning. And one good thing that did come out of it, I realised there was a good chance of making moody money if you sidestepped the venue management and went for the head of security. Every venue has its licence on the line. The door team, on the other hand, were a different kettle of fish. They'd let in another 500, as long as they're getting like 500 quid. If a ticket's a £20 a pop, that's 9,500 you've just made yourself. I still couldn't get out of my catch-22 situation. You know, I wanted to promote, but I didn't have the money. All I could do was to keep asking people to invest. I met up with a couple of fellas, Phil and Mick. Mick was a small bloke, and Phil was short and stout with a ponytail. They seemed like good guys. They run a show called Desire. I told them I had no dough, but a head full of ideas, and I just needed somebody to back me. They said they'd come on board and split the money down the middle. Great. As it happened, we only did one party together at the Rocket on the Holloway Road, just up from Islington. It was a small thing. Capacity was 2,000 people, but it should have been a great night. The problem was I'd immediately forgotten Terry's golden rule. The cash box, Tell, the cash box. They handled the cash box. At the end of the night, it was light, very light. Again, it was a simple enough scam. They had a geezer clicking everyone in on the door, and he must have been a little bit forgetful. Surprise, surprise. It turned out he clicked through a lot fewer people than my mate, who'd been doing the same thing, on the quiet for me. We'd actually had a really good night. It would have been something we could have built on. We could have gone on to great things together, maybe. Who knows? But they'd f*** that for the sake of 2 or 3 grand. Even more annoying, when it came to divvy up the money, Phil said, "Oh, here's your third, Tell." And I said, "Hang on a minute, about what third? I want half like we agreed." We had discussions about baseball bats and shooters and then said their goodbyes. It wasn't worth arguing about, much less killing or being killed over. Still, I learned yet another important lesson. In a cash business that teeters on the edge of illegality, with drugs and violence in the air, it is going to be full of... You cannot trust anyone except very close friends and your immediate family. And even sometimes they... So from now on, I was going to do this thing on my own. One other good thing came out of the shenanigans at the Rocket. I had made a few thousand quid. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a great start. And I was on my way to launching One Nation as a true business. Thank you so much for tuning in to the King and Clubs Part 2. Make sure you tune in next week. We've got another great chapter, Part 3, for you to enjoy. Same time, same place, and we will see you on the other side.